these are the results from the leadership group and the staff. And so I'm starting with the leadership group because the commitment has to come from these two groups. And I don't know if I mentioned this before, but the reason why I selected the exercise to select some practices from each of these 5 elements is because the research that Deloitte did said that a lot of companies usually always do employee engagement surveys and then they don't have anything tangible to work from. Because if you guys could remember, the bottom 3 that we're gonna work from has to do with trust, workflow, and relationships. So how do you operationalize that? And so these elements of engagement will help us to operationalize a plan. And so that's what this is about today. So the top tier is what leadership chose, and the tier underneath is what the staff chose. And coincidence is exactly the same. The only thing with the staff is that they had humanistic workplace tied with flexible environment. And these things can go hand in hand. The research says that all 20 of those practices have to be in play throughout the organization. And that's why I encouraged you as a leader that although these are the top categories that were selected, individuals might have something that's more important to them than autonomy. And that's why I ask that you sit down with your staff and share with them, let them share with you which one of these are important to them to have a meaningful workplace. And so, any comments about or surprised about the results? 11 people returned the responses from the staff. I got 11 responses back. Yep. But again, this is the start of engagement, and so we have to take the people that are interested in participating, we have to work with the groups that's interested. That's how change happens. It's going to be small, and hopefully it'll increase once we put a plan in place and we adhere to it and try to work through it. Yeah, so it was the 11 people who sent me feedback on what was their top category from the staff. All right. So in order to operationalize these elements and for us to work from the same page, I put together some information on each one of the elements. So in order for us to have autonomy in the workplace, we have to acknowledge negative feelings about projects. All of us have pieces and parts of our job that we enjoy less than others, but we still have to get it done. So part of allowing your staff to have autonomy is to address these areas. So there may be parts of your job that you're not that happy with, but it still needs to get done. So how do we work together, or what do you need from me in order for you to work through to get this particular project done, or this particular area of your work that you don't enjoy as much? And so the other part is taking ownership over organizing your tasks. So what works best for you in your workflow? As a leader, to engage your staff, those things are important for you to know. So again, you're gonna see the theme around all of this is building relationships and trust with the people that you work with and the people that report to you. And then the other one is finding practical solutions for a better work-life balance. You know, we all have lives outside of here, so how do we balance that? How reasonable are we with individuals when they present issues to us? How flexible are we in working through those things? And then talking to your manager and asking for more input, because clarification, if you're not clear about what you're expected to do, that reduces your level of autonomy, because autonomy is having control over your workflow and how you manage your work throughout the day. So clear expectations are critical. And then emphasize an interest in your task. So sharing with others what interests you and vice versa. So that way we're engaged. So clear and transparent goals, that was the other second of the 5 elements. So having clear and transparent goals sets the foundation for autonomy, because if I don't know what's expected of me, then I have less autonomy, because as my boss, you could keep pulling the carrot if I'm not clear about what you expect from me. So this is really, really important for staff to be engaged. They have to know what's expected of them, and they have to be clear about what those expectations are. And this humanistic workplace, it's a bottom-up approach. It's about the employee and not necessarily the employer. It's about what the employee needs psychologically to be able to function and do their work well. It's about bringing purpose to the workplace. You know, do you know your employee? Do you care about them? And so all of those things matter. So this humanistic idea is about teamwork, collaboration, dignity, and respect for one another. The employee is at the center and not the employer, because we're depending on the employees in order to get the job done. So they are the center of what we do, because they do the work. Training and support on the job. You know, this is about the leadership group. And that's why I'm presenting to this group first, because it's going to take our commitment to initiate this engagement and to be the champions of making it work. And so it's this whole idea about 21st century leadership. We're no longer in a society where it's this authoritarian type of leadership. Do as I say. You get resistance in that type of style. So 21st century leadership is about inclusive leadership. It's about collaboration. It's about teamwork, fairness. You know, some of these things may not apply to us, but I think we have some parts and pieces of our job that are automated. I know in HR we have a lot of things that are moving towards self-service. So that's part of automation. So how do we make an adjustment to those changes in the 21st century? Organizations must have the culture, the structure, and the management processes to cultivate 21st century leaders. So in this particular study, the gaps were transparency, internal collaboration, and performance management. We need to determine if those are the same for us. And I think based on the results from the employee engagement survey, transparency was a big one, and collaboration. And so I don't know, what do you guys think? Can we adopt transparency, internal collaboration, and performance management as some key areas that we need to work on? Anybody? You agree or you disagree?
So what do we mean by we're saying transparency?
So we're going to talk about it on the next slide. Yep.
Before I can answer your question.
Okay, so I'm going to go to the next slide and I'm going to hold you to it. Okay, so transparency and honesty. So these are 6 things that leaders can do to promote transparency. So make it a part of your policy or your practice. Confront difficult situations, don't avoid them. Hold an Ask Me Anything session. Provide access to information. Always have a why. I mean, people have a right to understand the why of what they're doing or what they're being asked to do, and involve people in decision making. I think we heard that when I presented this to the all staff. You know, they were talking about being involved in decisions that affect their workflow. And so basically that's what transparency is being open and honest and answering questions and, you know, making it a part of your practice that you share information with people. So transparency will only benefit us. It will not hurt us. So creating an atmosphere of honesty also fosters an environment of self-accountability and responsibility. It builds trust That was one of the outcomes that we had from the employee engagement survey, that we need to be more trustworthy. And part of trustworthiness or transparency is being reliable to operate with a level of integrity, be sincere about when people ask you a question. If you can't tell them or you can't share it at that time, say that. You don't have to be, when we create an environment where it seems like there's a secret, then people fill in those blanks for us. And that's how we get, all of the misunderstandings that we end up having. Any questions so far? Okay, these are the 5 elements. I just put this back up here just as a reminder. And so, any questions? So today we have to talk about what this plan is going to look like. And like I said, it starts with this group, because I think in the feedback that we receive from the staff, we're clear about what the issues are. The issues are lack of trust, lack of transparency. And so as a leadership group, from ELC to middle managers, we need to talk about how does that look from this group to that group, and then from middle managers to the employees. So we need to have some dialogue, because it's not my sole responsibility to create a plan. This is a collective, collaborative effort.
So one of the things that stands out to me, that was one of our low areas, was that senior leadership relationship with the unit staff. And so when you start to talk about transparency and trust, how can we create a tangible plan of action that allows us to create and build those relationships and be transparent.
Right.
One of the things that we've been talking about recently was that leadership branding, and we're hoping to bring that to discussion to the middle managers, but increasing visibility, working together, upper leadership with middle management in tandem, going into units and engaging the staff. Incorporating that into our plan of action is really helpful for us to create relationships with one another. So we get that randomized process that puts, Steve walking with Doug on the unit. So that, an executive leader in the clinical side of the house with an operations person can walk around engaging with the unit staff, talking about what kind of things, can we do different, and just that presence alone, I think, is a baby step.
And so then how do we plan to incorporate these 5 elements into these practices that we're talking about? So we need to have an understanding of, if the majority of the people are saying autonomy is important to them, how do we operationalize that? If people are saying that they need clear and transparent goals, then we need to operationalize that. And part of that is how we communicate. Even though we have many forums in which we communicate, we still don't do it effectively. And all of us say this at any given time, that sometimes emails do not relay the message that was intended. So in lieu of emails, how do we plan to communicate maybe differently for things that are significant, that are going to truly impact somebody's workflow? At the all-staff meeting, Libby talked about, and Bonnie, I believe, talked about being at the table for things like policy changes. So can we reorganize how we look at policies for revisions? Is that an opportunity for us to bring other people at the table to look at those policies, some subject matter experts from the various departments, and not just an ELC person representing that whole department? So how can we incorporate involving the staff more in policy revisions? So I think that's an opportunity.
And that's one that you can actually use every single one of these and hit those goals. Giving them autonomy, creates meaningful work, and getting them involved, and then by that experience you're building that transparency and trust. So there's a lot of...
Yeah, so I just want to remind us that when we start to create this plan, we need to not forget those 5 elements. We need to find a way to incorporate that into the practice. And then, like I shared with everyone, when you sit down with your employees to set goals, bring those things, let them share with you what they identify that was important to them out of those 5 elements, so that you can then have that relationship building with them. We're doing a big picture thing, but then let's also try to do some individualized relationship building with the people that we work with every day.
I also like that why piece. That's really big. Even, you and I were talking about this morning, even if you don't necessarily understand, or agree with it, if you have an understanding as to why, it helps. Yes. It really does, yes. And even for you guys that, middle managers, get tired of the changes, but do this, and for you to understand the why behind it makes a huge difference. Maybe this is something the director wants us to do, or maybe CMS wants us to do it, or maybe we just thought it was a good idea. So there's all kinds of dynamics into that.
And so maybe when we have new things to present, we always start out with the why. We're doing this because. And then that way people are, like we said, they may not always agree, but they have a right to have an understanding as to why. And then we can do, the regular roundings that we did with the units, just an open session to ask questions that meets that as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We can even take initiatives that we're trying to promote and use that rounding tools and efforts. So maybe we're doing this, so those 2 representatives are talking to the unit staff and giving feedback, and then every week at leadership, they're sharing with us what they've learned. Right. And we're hearing their voice.
So, and I'm going to say this to this leadership group, because we have to be engaged. If we're not engaged with one another, we are not going to encourage the employees to be engaged with us. We have to set the example that we want to see. And so, I think even the rounding piece is good, where we alternate so people can get to know one another. Sometimes we deal with each other from a distance, and that's easy to make people the other. When we get to know each other a little bit more, and you don't, like I said, I tell people all the time, you don't have to know everybody's life details, but if I have something in common with you, that's one connection. So we need to start with this group, because if we don't learn to do that, we can't have an expectation for the staff. And so that's part of this whole process. And so according to as leaders, we should be flexible in our leadership style. So we shouldn't be married to just one leadership style, because part of leadership is being able to flex with the type of individual that you're dealing with. So all of us work with different people with different personalities. So I can't have the same personality and be effective with this employee like I might be able to be effective with this employee. I need to be able to be flexible, to change styles in dealing with employees to meet them where they are. And so we have to be open and willing to be flexible in how we manage.
I hear rounding to the units where most of the employees work, but what about rounding to pharmacy, or rounding to the housekeepers, or rounding to the treatment hall staff? I think that's equally important. Yes.
I was in pharmacy a couple of weeks ago to help Mike with the PEs, and I never been in there. I told him, I said, I've never been in here. But yeah, those things are important, because a lot of times, just like third shift feels isolated, we have departments on day shift that feel isolated because, nobody checks on them, or we just, things are working and we just tend to ignore it. So you're right. All of those things are important. Any feedback, any suggestions, any ideas? Go ahead.
I think the subgroups, starting to do those, and we've done those in the past, and we're starting to do more of those now. I think those are really important. That way the employee feels like they have a voice, and they actually have, they come to the table with ideas, and in ways to change things, or hey, you know, and that could be for policies, that could be for scheduling, that could be for all, you know, everything across the board. I mean, down to subgroups, even for the treatment mall. Okay, you guys don't like the treatment mall the way it's doing this. Well, let's have a subgroup and bring the ideas, and you know, and then that way they feel engaged, and you know, they can present on ways, and those can be evaluated, you know, for change.
And I think that's one important thing that I think we do a good job bringing groups together, but I think where we need to improve on is the follow-up, the sustainability of the changes that we're trying to make. I think that's where we need the most work. And so we need to have a framework of how this subgroup is going to work, what's the responsibilities of that subgroup, who's going to be the champion to relay the information. So we need to identify champions on each subgroup to be able to come back and close the loop and report back. So I'm just saying, from my observation and experience since I've been here, that's the one area that we fall short, that we implement something and then we don't have a follow-up mechanism, and then it falls through the cracks, and then we find ourselves talking about it again and again and again. So we just have to make a commitment to have a full loop of how do we close it, and if it can be reconciled, say it's a policy, when does that reconciliation happen? What's the date that it happens, so we know we can move on safely to something else.
And you can always identify in the nursing department, you can identify, you know, a champion on each shift.
Yes.
And it could be one TBW, it could be an RN.
yeah.
And that person would be, you know, the liaison between management and, you know, and the floor. And I think then that staff would be able to report stuff to them. They would get together. Yeah, and I think that would open up communication.
That's good. I think so.
Brian, even what you said, and not so much as like one RN, one TPW, but how about all three disciplines on each shift?
Yes.
LPNs don't work nights, so I
Well, yeah, and I was identifying.
But yeah, it just one from each, because each has their own take on
Yep.
the issue. Right.
Absolutely.
And then like Peter was saying, even Andrew, when you get the whys as to why we need to do things, I'm telling you, people buy into it more. But when you just say, hey, we're rolling this out, and they don't have any rationale and as to why, that's where trouble starts. And then when we can't effectively explain it, you know, we don't know. So, you know, those make a difference. And then outcomes, like you said, once the group has reached consensus and this is the outcome, let's not keep that group going if we can move on to something else versus, you know, meeting just indefinitely for what?
Or yeah, closing that group and starting anew. Yeah, absolutely.
You know, one of the things we talk about is, you know, is supposed to be engaging staff. And so how do you engage staff? Me, I come in at 6:30 in the morning now. I make sure I talk to my night staff, I make sure I talk to my second staff, and getting to know my employees. So how is we as a group going to get to know our employees, which the majority is nursing? You know, you got to come down. You got to come to the floors. You got to engage them. See what they do. Do you even know what they do? You know, when we sit and listen to IRs and it sounds so ridiculous that we miss this, but are you in my world to see how many things that I had to do that I missed this one thing that you guys are scrutinizing and coming out with another policy? You know, you really get, talking about engagement, you got to be there. You got to come talk to them. You know, when we started a long time ago, we always start something, we never finish it. Because I remember when this group was supposed to go and start engaging staff, and I think two people showed up and we never seen them anymore. So, you know, if we're going to do something, then make an investment to do it. Because when I sit here and listen to this, I say in my mind, I heard this before, didn't go through, nobody's really invested in making this happen. So it's like, to me, it's like a waste of time. So, you know, we're either going to do it, put an investment into it, get to know our staff, get to know their concerns, get to know what they do and how they do, or there's just no plan. I mean, this all looks good, but, you know, if you don't do it, what does it matter?
But like I said, it starts with this room, and if we aren't engaged in this room with one another and we don't try to find ways to support each other, starting here and develop a plan that we all can operationalize and understand, closing the loop on things, and how do we do that? We need to come to an agreement with a plan that have indicators and outputs, and what are we looking to gain from this? And what we're looking for is to build trust and relationships so that we can have a more transparent workplace. But again, it starts with the leaders. We have to hold each other accountable. So if I was committed to do something and you see that I missed my deadline or it's come in, say to me, Kiva, hey, what about this? Then you say, we have to be willing to hold each other accountable, to look out to say, is this completed? Instead of, well, it wasn't my job, so you know what, I'm not going to say anything about it, and oh well. If we have that attitude, we can't expect anything different from the others. So just like you said, people are busy. One of us could be the champion of something here, and then something came up and maybe they forgot. So how are we working together to remind each other, to hold each other accountable? And that's why I said identifying a champion on each group is important, and then you know that's the go-to person. And then that champion can look for ways to find support within that group as well. But it's going to take work. It's not going to be easy, but again, it starts with us. And so, you know, it's not going to get better until we get better at how we interact and communicate with one another. So I think this is a start, but we have to keep it on the agenda. We have to identify the areas. I think we have a couple of tools, like Andrea mentioned, that we can begin to work with so we can have small successes. And I think that's what we should do. We should start small. I don't think we should try to put out any other big thing, because I think the staff are also exhausted by big things. So let's just commit that if we have a policy that needs to review, that we get the right people at the table so that they can have input. When we start this rounding tool, let's look at those elements, talk to people, let the staff know that when we're doing this rounding, it's not to catch anyone, but it's part of this engagement for us to hear from them what they're doing, support them in what they're doing, and identify things before they become big. And so how we roll out this rounding tool is also going to be a key, because if it's rolled out and people have the impression that we're just there to police, here they're going to shut down again. So again, that why are we doing this? And what's the significance and importance of it? And how is it helpful to you in your role and what you do?
Well, when I look at that rounding tool that Steve brought to the table, that's all that looks like to me, is a policing. Now, if we're talking about we want to engage staff, you need to not come with papers in your hand. You're coming to look at people, talk to them, engage them. Hey, show me how you do rounds. Show me why is it difficult that you can't do the rounds in the milieu? And they can tell you, well, it's supposed to be 2 people on the floor, but when we have this admission, then you know what I mean? But if we go around with a checklist, I'm telling you.
Well, that came from the central office. Are we able to adjust that for our own needs?
Yeah, that's why we set it up.
And maybe even choosing an hour and going and maybe picking a meal time and actually going out there and serving trays with them, you know, or actually going out and doing the rounds, or standing in there while they're passing meds on the outside, you know, engaging with the patients as they're standing in line and stuff like that. That would probably really make them feel like, you know.
And that's what we need to hear.
That would be a better approach.
Okay. I was here late last Thursday and decided while I was still here to make some rounds to see folks I don't always see. And so I went around to all the units, and it just happened to be when patients were out at privileges. So the staff on the units had a lot of people out, and it was more laid back. They were very welcoming, and just, it was a whole different atmosphere than during the day or late afternoon when there's mealtime or a lot of other things that go on in day shift, and catching them when people are at privileges and was more calm, and so, had some good conversations.
Even maybe leadership going out there and doing groups, maybe with the patients. Wouldn't that be nice? Maybe taking the patients down to the gym one day, or or something where you have enough staff, something like that.
Well, I think Karen can talk. We already had leaders doing groups. Lori did a group. I volunteered to do a group for HR for interviews. Mike has done groups. I mean, these are things that we can do to connect us to why we're here. And sometimes, just something little like that makes a difference. So yeah, those are all the kinds of things that we can do.
Patients that enjoy it.
And if they see us out there working, leaders out there working, they're going to connect better, and they're not going to feel that we're, they're going to have that human, that interaction, and not just feel that we're there watching them, because they're going to be joining right along with us, and so that's important.
You want to say something?
Yes.
Okay.
I have an observation. We are a hospital with quite a few committees. And do we have the right people at the table if our goal is to meet this goal that you're talking about? Are we doing the type of engagement with employees as a criteria for such a committee, to exist? The decisions that a lot are made first shift. We don't have committees that have second and third shift members. So how do we meet that in a 3-shift environment? Because for me, I see that as a gap. We can have a patient safety committee, but these are all people that are here on first shift. As if nothing happens on second and third shift, which is not true. So how do we engage those in the actual committees that actually report out and make recommendations?
You have an ELC group. Maybe you recognize employees as a type of ELC group, and those employees, they may have subgroups on each shift, but maybe there's one or two identified, up front, and a backup, and that these meetings are held, and you come to the table and you bring all these things from each shift, but that would be your executive, nursing staff leadership, whatever you would want to call that group maybe. And that would make them feel, and obviously have it at different time. You could have it at a time where you could possibly get all 3 shifts here, and maybe you have a backup person, so you can always have somebody there at the table, but it might make them feel empowered and have a voice, I don't know.
Yeah, we haven't asked them, so I can't assume an answer, which is kind of probably the first thing that we want to do. If we have functional committees here, how do we engage second and third shift staff in those committees? And if I'm a chairman of the committee, I feel like I need to engage second and third shift. And I had suggested this before about at some point rotating if someone's administration was here on the second shift and the third shift, just to have I don't know how that would work.
Yeah, I think that's part of the rounding tool, right, Andrea? That we do off shifts and weekends.
Because the decision making is happening on first shift.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And that in itself is a challenge. So how do we do that?
Yeah, I think that rounding tool involves off shift and weekends. And so that's part of the goal is you're right. How do we engage second and third shift staff?
You can schedule those meetings within, on those shifts, and obviously do the rounding piece. Or you have it at a time where, you can get people to the table.
Okay. Any other conversation? I would encourage you guys that if you have any ideas other than what we talked about today, that you share them. All of us are in contact with different people in different disciplines and departments, and so, your staff might have ideas that we haven't thought about. But again, we're just trying to find out what people need in order for them to feel like their work is meaningful and they have the level of autonomy they need, that they feel like they're part of, and not left out. Because like I talked about, this 21st century leadership is about inclusion. How do we make people feel like they're a part of the team? And how do we value differences, and you know, how do we collaborate with one another and work in teams? And you know, teams are tough. For any of you that did college or work on any project, teams are, the dynamics of a team, that's what you have to manage first in order for you to get the outcome you're looking for. So how do you manage the dynamics of the personalities of the people on that team so that we can successfully get to the outcome that we were tasked with? And so it's the same here in the workplace. You know, we all work hopefully towards the same goal, but we all have a different piece to fulfill that main goal. So how do we get there? So if I know that, you know, nursing department is depending on me for something, I'm going to make that a priority because I'm not the sole person that's needing that. Somebody else is depending on me to get this done. So I should be mindful of that. You know, that if I don't get this done, it hinders them getting what they need done. It's just like Joint Commission. Brandon is dependent on every last one of us to fulfill what we're required to so that his job isn't more difficult than it needs to be. So again, it's just being thoughtful about who's depending on who for what, and how are we making that a priority. So I think that's it, Andrea. So we just need to sit down and put that in writing.
How the structure and how it looks. And like we were saying, we don't want it to be too overwhelming.
Right.
Something simple, maybe 3 things.
Mm-hmm.
If that's too much, you know,
Right.
we talked about the rounding tool, and a lot of the recommendations that were made, we can kind of incorporate into that. We talked about this start with why. Maybe we have like any initiative that goes out, we explain it. We have like a start with why or announcements or emails, and we tie it to employee engagement. We let them know, hey, this is something that came out of this. You know, we are explaining this initiative. And then they kind of talk about the peer-led stuff, the groups, the champions, the leaders, doing ships, committees, and anything that we're tying into the initiatives. Maybe we give to this peer leader group. So there's a lot of good ideas. It's just how do we make it work, and then how do we keep it.
So would we be able to send something out, maybe in announcements about this rounding tool, tell them the purpose of the rounding tool, just start sharing with them how it looks, any recommendations for, you know, what you would like us to start looking for? That way at least they have an opportunity to offer feedback. And then if we can't use it in the format that they're envisioning, at least then we can share with them why, and then they at least know. So when they see us coming around, it's not like, woo, you know, we got it out in advance enough for people to be able to weigh in and then at least understand why we're doing it. Yeah.
Than just the announcements.
Okay.
I don't think enough people read those.
Okay.
So I think if we print out something and maybe post it on the nurses station.
And then maybe when people have their regular meetings, they make that an agenda item to discuss. Yeah. Mm-hmm.